Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Maxwell, Thomson, Reuters, the Answer Company. This book is Sale of Shares and Businesses, Law, Practice and Agreements. It's about money and it's about the future development of particular important entrepreneurial activities, generally speaking. The book's, as I say, 5th edition from Andrew Stilton. Elizabeth was the lead writer on this book, and the title she's given for the book review is The Essential Work of Reference for Corporate Lawyers, now in a new edition incorporating recent developments in GDPR. That's the General Data Protection Regulation. Let's have a look at the book first of all. It's part of the commercial series. There's the front of the book. You can see there the actual title. It's reasonably easy to read. There's the spine. It says part of the commercial series. That's basically their library. There's nothing on the back. The book is heavy. It's a hardback, and there's actually a CD at the back, which is very helpful, which is quite an important addition. Obviously there are terms and conditions for the CD when you open it. I have to say I don't use CDs very much, and I think a lot of other people don't either now, because things have moved on a bit with the web. However, this is important for a lot of people, and then if you have got a device you can obviously use it. There's a disclaimer right at the back, and that's about the CD itself, and then the actual disclaimer is there. Then you've got the index at the back, which again is by paragraph numbering. It's very much the house style of Maxwell, and you've got the legal taxonomy mentioned. That explains how it's structured and how you use it. You can then there see at the back, there's precedent 40 is mentioned right at the back. That's the locked box provisions for inclusion. Let me go, without getting too technical, let me go to the front of the book now. There is the front page there, and then you've got details. The book was first published in 2006, and this new edition obviously has to come out in the end of 2018. Do read Andrew's preface at the front, and then go from that. There is actually a dedication. I owe so much to, he mentions a particular person, Theo Christophers, and I'm going to mention that now because the book is dedicated to him, but it's actually in the preface. So I will mention that because I think that's an important point. Table of contents, there in detail. You should be able to find what you're looking for, just running through quite a lot of detail. What you've got is 27 chapters in total, and then the General Data Protection Regulation is the final chapter, and obviously that's had to be included. Then there are various appendices and precedents. You can see Appendix 1, or Appendices 1, is financial, and then Appendix 2 is the precedents, and they run all the way through from Precedent 1 all the way through to Precedent 40. And then there's an index. There's the table of cases, and then after the cases, not as many, you'll be pleased to hear, some statutes. Always get out and best, you can guess which one is actually the big one. That's right, the Companies Act. And then after that, the table of statutory instruments. And then you've got some European legislation, and a word of warning, notwithstanding whatever happens to Brexit, we are still going to have European legislation. It's split into parts, the book. Part 1 starts off with the pre-acquisition disposal, as would be the normal case with any corporate governance issue. You start off with pre-incorporation, and we go from there. In other words, the promotion and everything else, the pre-acquisition and so forth. You've got paragraph numbering there, and you can see, in fact, there's very little in the way of footnoting, which I find quite helpful. You can see the paragraph number is quite good, and of course the cases are in italics. It's a very important book. I think most people within the corporate legal world will know about the book itself. Obviously it's an important book in its own way, and it's a specialist book. But the reason that we're reviewing it is because it's an area that I certainly was involved in as academically, and also to a more limited extent in practice as a common practitioner. But the book is important. So what we're talking about here is practitioners involved in corporate transactions, including sales of shares or businesses, or both, need ideally an encyclopedic knowledge of the procedures and processes involved. It's a formidable requirement, if ever there was one. Unfortunately, help is at hand in the form of this long-established and ever-reliable work of reference, now out in a new 5th edition from Sweet and Maxwell. And in collaboration with colleagues at Keystone Law and others at Baker Tilly, a firm of accountants as they used to be known, and also at Peter Roney Tax Consulting Limited, the author, Andrew Stilton, is careful to clarify at the outset the differences between the two basic deal structures for buying and selling a business. That is specifically the sale and purchase of some or all of its assets, as opposed to the sale and purchase of its shares. And I think that's a very important point to bear in mind. And it's also important to note that in the case of a sale, the assets and liabilities of the business will still belong to the company, with no change in its contractual relationships. Further details of the relative advantages and disadvantages of share purchases and or business purchases are discussed in the text, followed by clear and illuminating explanation of the key aspects of what is often a complex subject. Now, I make no bones about this. The basic, simple law and practice is relatively easy to follow. This goes into a great deal of detail, which I think will help, but it is a relatively narrow area, so bear with me. The reason I think this is important is because it's an excellent book, and it does focus attention very much on the sale of shares and of businesses. So key issues that immediately emerge from the complexities that I've highlighted are taxation and due diligence. The latter, of course, encompassing financial due diligence and legal due diligence, each dealt with in some depth. This is very much a 21st century problem because it's because it's global, if I want to put it that way. I do feel that it's useful to have this information. And in Appendix 1, you've got typical areas that may be covered in a financial due diligence report. That's right at the back, and I think it's helpful. As this is a fast-changing area of law, then, the new material in the new edition is worthy of note, and much of it deals with, since the previous edition in 2015, the recent developments in GDPR, as I say, General Data Protection Regulation, which in the author's opinion, quote, heralds a new dawn in the concept of data protection. Well, that's one way of putting it. I mean, some people are not at all happy, but it does give you an idea of where we're going. Again, I have to say, it's a mess. We've got to get everybody to agree, and you've got this bit here and that bit there and all the other bits all over the place. But the difficulty is we are going to have to get some good international agreements because of all the twisters out there who will do all sorts of devious things. So at least it's a start, even though, as I say, some people are not that happy. The issues, of course, involved range from completion, confidentiality and consent to relevant M&A, merger and acquisition transactions, to lawfulness, fairness and non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, another area of problems, to storage limitation, and of course lots more. Now that is why it's such a big area, and it's very much of a modern area because the law has obviously got to keep up to date with these very substantial changes that are taking place with the way business is done, the business of business. And as you would expect, and as practitioners will appreciate, the book provides impressive amounts of research resources for you, including tables of cases, statutes, SIs and the European stuff. And if you need to look up something in a hurry, simply turn to the table of contents, which is at the front, which is very detailed, and of course the very detailed and lengthy index at the back, which is the legal taxonomy, which is very much the house style of Sweden Maxwell. Also, of course, note the 350 pages of precedents, which are at the back, about 40 of them, in Appendix 2. The book certainly abounds in helpful time-saving features, in our view, which aid navigation, including the numbered paragraphs throughout. And, of course, there's the CD, which I showed you at the beginning, attached to the back cover. So if you encounter any problems running or installing it, there's a helpline available. Therefore, let me conclude by saying we think corporate lawyers will no doubt regard this book as an essential purchase, as will anybody else for that matter who's involved professionally in financial services. And the date of publication of the 5th edition is given as October 2018, depending on where you see it, because the dates do tend to change depending on which website you look at. Big thank you to Andrew Stilton and everybody who's been involved in this book, because he's had a lot of assistance, which he generously mentions. As I've said at the beginning, he mentions that in the preface and dedicates it to Mr. Christophers. Let me just open it. Stamp duties, chapter 15. Well, there's something to send you to sleep very quickly. No disrespect, but actually he does it lightly. There's a light touch with this, so it's readable. There's the paragraph numbering, and you can see he gets straight to the point very quickly. In what are some very difficult, what I would call accounting areas, if I can put it that way. It's something I can remember when I did my bar course, where a number of colleagues would rather run a mile than become involved in too much of this stuff. But there again, it depends on what your motivations are. Can I thank everybody very much who's been involved in the publication of the new edition? Very grateful. It makes our lives so much easier. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.